Inside a sealed room in Washington, officials are quietly budgeting $62 billion to claim 836,000 square miles of Arctic territory, Greenland. Not with tanks, but with treaties, spreadsheets, and a legal doctrine designed to bypass Denmark. Leaked documents show deadlines, not daydreams. If this is the real path to a 51st American state, who is actually pulling the strings, and how far will this timeline go? From the heart of Washington's legal bureaucracy, a new doctrine is being drafted. It claims the power to override international law when American interests are threatened. The language is precise, almost clinical. The phrase "override upon vital threat" is buried deep in a classified State Department brief and forms the backbone of the legal case for absorbing Greenland into the United States system. The architects behind this strategy are not politicians, but Pentagon counsel and State Department lawyers who pore over historical precedents and search for legal levers that can bypass traditional barriers. Central to their argument is the so-called national security necessity doctrine. This is not an invention of the present moment. In 1903, the United States invoked a similar rationale to secure the Panama Canal Zone, arguing that control of the waterway was essential to national defense. The resulting treaty, cited in footnotes and internal memos, set a precedent. When vital interests are at stake, the United States can claim extraordinary rights even over foreign territory. The new legal annex for Greenland borrows heavily from this playbook, framing the Arctic island as strategic territory whose fate cannot be left to a foreign government unable to defend it from rival powers. Pentagon lawyers have assembled a library of cases and historical examples to support their position. The 1941 occupation of Greenland during World War II is flagged as proof that the United States has stepped in before, justified by the collapse of Denmark's government under Nazi occupation. Now, with China's growing presence in the Arctic, the legal team argues that the threat is just as real, only this time the battlefield is economic and diplomatic rather than military. Internal task force documents circulate with references to the Panama Model and the Vital Threat Clause, shaping a narrative that transforms a spreadsheet of costs into a lawful roadmap for annexation. What emerges is a legal framework that treats Greenland not as a distant landmass, but as a critical extension of American security, one that can, if necessary, be claimed by the stroke of a pen. In April 1941, as Nazi forces tightened their grip on Europe, the United States acted swiftly. Danish ambassador Henrik Kaufmann, cut off from an occupied Copenhagen, signed an agreement on April 9th that granted the U.S. military the right to defend and operate in Greenland. This was not a decision made in open dialogue with Denmark's government, but a calculated move by American and exiled Danish officials. The Kaufmann Agreement, signed in Washington, gave the U.S. unprecedented latitude to establish bases and airstrips across the island, bypassing both Danish authority and international norms. Within weeks, American engineers landed on Greenland's southern coast, carving out the first of the Bluey West airstrips from the permafrost. These runways became vital lifelines for transatlantic flights and weather stations, feeding intelligence to Allied planners. U.S. military orders from 1941, now yellowed with age, authorized unrestricted movement and construction, treating Greenland as a strategic outpost rather than a distant colony. The occupation was justified as temporary, but American forces would not fully withdraw when the war ended. The precedent set in 1941 reverberated through the decades. In 1951, the United States and Denmark formalized their arrangement with a bilateral defense agreement. This treaty, still in force, granted the U.S. the right to operate bases like Thule Air Base, now called Patuxent Space Base, under a clause that allows for perpetual use as long as NATO requires. The text of the 1951 agreement, negotiated by Cold War officials on both sides, contains language that leaves the door open for future expansion and indefinite presence. These historical documents reveal a pattern. Under the banner of crisis, the United States has claimed operational control over Greenland before, and the legal scaffolding remains in place. The mechanisms of 1941 and 1951, emergency agreements, base rights, and perpetual clauses, provide a living blueprint for any renewed effort to integrate Greenland into the American security sphere. Deep in the United States Treasury Department, planners draft a timeline that turns economic policy into a tool of control. The first step is to introduce the United States dollar alongside the Danish krone in Greenland, launching an 18-month dual currency phase. By July 2027, a Federal Reserve branch in Nuuk is scheduled to open its doors, with staff flown in under diplomatic cover. This is not just a technical exercise. Every Greenlandic bank account is assigned a conversion rate, and local businesses receive instructions for handling both currencies. Once the transition completes, the krone disappears from circulation, leaving the dollar as the sole legal tender. Parallel to these financial maneuvers, the United States State Department channels grant money into Greenland's political landscape. Under the code name Aurora, funds are routed through third-party NGOs to support pro-independence campaigns, media outlets, and social media influencers. The messaging is subtle, framing Denmark as a distant overseer and positioning independence as a path to prosperity. American consultants fluent in Greenlandic quietly manage the rollout from temporary offices in Reykjavik. The result is a web of dependency. As the dollar takes root and local politics shift, Greenland's economic and political fate becomes entwined with Washington's decisions. On January 12, 2026, a classified directive left the office of the Director of National Intelligence, bearing Tulsi Gabbard's signature. The order authorized a surge in signals intelligence targeting Greenlandic officials, specifically those with links to Danish ministries or Chinese business delegations. National Security Agency analysts, working from secure facilities in Maryland and Alaska, began intercepting encrypted satellite calls routed through Nuuk. Every flagged conversation was logged, cross-referenced, and sent up the chain for review. Simultaneously, the Central Intelligence Agency Psychological Operations Division rolled out a new matrix of influence campaigns. Internal memos listed Greenlandic political figures as priority targets for information shaping, some marked for subtle discrediting, others for quiet support. Social media accounts seeded months earlier amplified narratives about economic opportunity and security threats. Content in Greenlandic and Danish appeared on local forums, nudging public sentiment toward uncertainty about Copenhagen's ability to protect the island's interests. A partial excerpt of the Director of National Intelligence January memo justified these activities as safeguarding democratic processes against foreign manipulation. The language was clinical, describing proactive counter-influence measures authorized under national security necessity. For the analysts behind the screens, the mission was clear: ensure no foreign power, not even Denmark, could outmaneuver Washington's interests in the Arctic's most coveted territory. Pentagon planners moved beyond legal memos and currency timelines, turning to hardware and real estate. In February 2026, a draft schematic labeled Golden Dome circulates through defense channels. It is a missile shield designed to link Greenlandic radar and sensor arrays directly into the continental United States defense grid. The proposal calls for a permanent ring of installations along the Arctic coast, each site mapped out with GPS precision and classified for operational secrecy. Legal teams attach a lease for 99 years to every base, modeled after the Diego Garcia Agreement, with automatic renewal language that locks in American control regardless of political changes in Copenhagen or Nuuk. In the waters off Greenland's coast, military lawyers submit formal requests for exclusive United States rights to deploy sonar arrays and undersea drones across the GIUK Gap, citing Russian submarine movements as justification. These measures, signed, stamped, and filed, transform Greenland from a diplomatic bargaining chip into a fortified extension of the United States security perimeter. A single designation, unincorporated territory, reshapes life for more than 56,000 Greenlandic residents. Under this draft, Greenland falls under United States sovereignty, but without full constitutional rights. The insular cases, cited in internal legal memos, justify this arrangement. Congress holds absolute authority, yet Greenlanders would have no voting representation in Congress or a say in presidential elections. For the Inuit communities scattered along the coast, the consequences are immediate and personal. Infrastructure grants from the United States Export-Import Bank arrive, bypassing Danish oversight and binding local councils to repayment schedules set in Washington. Debt obligations climb, and with each new project, economic dependency deepens. Early in 2026, a tariff memo circulates in Brussels and Copenhagen, threatening a 25% duty on all European Union goods unless Denmark steps aside. The pressure is silent but relentless, leaving Greenlanders facing a future where every road, school, and hospital is collateral for decisions made an ocean away. Greenland's fate now pivots on power, not consent. As Arctic resources grow more valuable and superpowers redraw boundaries, sovereignty becomes a bargaining chip, not a right. What happens here will set the precedent for territorial ambition in a warming world. The map is still being drawn.